You coming in the room? Come on. Come on. You can do it. Up on the bed. It's a Chip. He has come to say happy day after Thanksgiving. He is just like, my mother is strange. Yes, Chip, I am strange. Get used to it. You're stuck with me. So, it's the day after Thanksgiving, which means it's Black Friday. I work later. My mom and I were undecorating for Thanksgiving downstairs, for like Halloween and Thanksgiving downstairs. I have my Christmas stuff up now up here. We'll be putting our Christmas stuff up downstairs either tomorrow or Sunday. And there's also a Husker football game today. It's a home game. At the time that I am recording this, it starts in about 10 minutes. About several blocks that way from where I live. Do you want out of the room? Or do you want pets? I know you want pets. You're a chipper chip who loves pets. I was gone most of the day yesterday. Yeah, we were out at one of my dad's brother's houses out in the middle part of Nebraska, and we were had a big family Thanksgiving out there. There was about 20 of us or so. So it was good. Lots of aunts and uncles, lots of cousins, second cousins, stuff like that. Fun. It's out at the farm, so there were cows. Yes, I'm a typical person from Nebraska who has at least one family member who has cows. I have also been to said farm and helped with said cows several years ago. Because reasons. So, time for chapter 1167. I'll do the 6-7 joke because reasons, and I don't know. It's stupid. Okay, so first we have the cover page. We have Nojiko and Genzo watching a cat steal a book about fish. And it's just a little viewer request thing of like, a cat is scolded for stealing a book, but Gen and Nojiko aren't mad. It's, of course, the reference to the fact because Nami's animal representation is a cat. Whenever this color gets colored for like the digital manga, the cat will probably be orange because Nami. It's also very similar to, of course, the way that we are, when Nami's a little kid, she steals the book about navigation and gets scolded by Genzo. And Nojiko and Genzo just cannot bring themselves to be mad. And I think we see the same bookseller in the background. So this is just running through Kokoyashi Village is what's going on here, which we just saw last week, a couple of weeks ago in the anime, which was nice. Okay, chapter 1165, Ida's Sons. We cover a good chunk of time in this time span in this chapter. So, we start off with 33 years ago, 5 years after God Valley. So this is taking place in the shadow of God Valley, or in the aftermath of God Valley, as, the other Yonko is like, Roger is still out exploring. Now he has Shanks on the crew as a little baby. We're not exactly sure. I don't think we see Gloriosa or Shaki in this chapter at all. So I'm assuming at some point in time they dropped them off somewhere. Shaki maybe got set up on Sabaody with her bar. Maybe Gloriosa stayed with her. Do you want out of the room? Or do you want petted? I love Chip. So we see here 33 years ago, we see Morgan's, and he's kind of upgraded a bit. He's kind of got like the headphones on, which is kind of funny. And he's out and he's interviewing various people, and it's just like he's interviewing this guy who's like, I could have sworn pirates were approaching off the shore, but there was something huge and shadowy emerging from the mist behind them. So, and then it's like continuing into Impel Down, the underwater prison, and we're seeing the prisoners talking with each other, and it's just like everything just went kaboom after that. Our ship was in ruins before we knew it, and we were nothing but fish food. What are the others? Sure, it wasn't a Sea King attack. Sure, it wasn't a Sea King attack. And I was like, no way. It was shaped like a human. And continuing other pirates who are going through this. Another interviewer just talking with them. Just like, don't tell me you were in the infamous waters of the Florian Triangle. So that is, of course, the reference back to the Florian Triangle, where we know at this point in time Brooke is just sitting around playing on his violin and going crazy, and back to saying and crazy, and back to saying and crazy, and back to saying and crazy, which just is, we say it as a joke, but I don't want to go through that. And we have this pirate here, and it's just like, fat chance, we don't fish near that region. Everyone knows to avoid it. So I don't think this is a pirate. I think this is just a regular guy who's a fisherman. He's just a sailor. He's not a pirate. He's just a fisherman. And he's just like, yeah, no, everybody knows to avoid that place. Yeah, sure they do. And he's just like, anyway, that monstrous thing. It's like, just that monstrous thing was definitely human-like. And it's just the narrator. During this period, a rumor began to circulate among the Grand Line countries. They said a monster lurked deep in the foggy seas, targeting pirate crews. So now we're seeing this, the fog. Because, of course, we know that the Grand Line is very notorious for all of its random weather crap. And, of course, the New World side of the Grand Line is much worse than the Paradise side of the New World. And much worse than the Paradise side of the Grand Line. Still, neither one are particularly safe, but one is worse than the other. And so we're seeing this giant ship that is clearly like one of the Elbas ships. It's got one of the figureheads. I don't know if it's the Great Eric. It might just be a different ship that has a similar figurehead. And we see a figure on it jumping, getting ready to attack. And we see a little pirate ship there, and we see a pirate, just like giant thing coming out of the sky, just coming out of nowhere. And it's just like, the identity of that monster was none other than Harald. Few who sailed those waters had ever seen a giant with their own eyes. So to them, he was nothing less than the very embodiment of fear. And we see him jumping out of the fog and just slicing this ship in half. The same way that, like Shanks destroyed the Victoria Punk. The same way that, like, Mihawk destroyed Don Krieg's ship. The same way that Zoro destroyed that one random ship when he first got to Saba Odi. And so it's just like this whole, no more ship. Just sliced in half. Harald now worked in the shadows to back up the Navy as part of his atonement for the last 1,000 years of history. So, and of course, at the end of the last chapter, Harald had ripped off his horns and had said that he would even, become a slave, become a servant, become, bound or whatever to the world government to atone for what the ancient giants of the past did, for what the Elbathians of the past had done. Because, and I still stand by what I have said, Harald's death is brought upon him by his own naivete, stupidity, hubris in the fact that he thinks he can trust the world government, which falls very much under the naivete of him. And we just see him, he is in grief and in mourning for losing Rox. He's got a lot of self-hatred for the fact that he didn't even try to go with Rox to try to help Rox save his own family. And if Harald had been there, he would have been appalled at what the world government was doing on the island. And he probably would have been able to help save a lot of people that were there on the island. He would have at least probably attempted to. And that might have been what would have changed his opinion, because I don't know if Rox has learned what the exact instances of what happened at God Valley were with the human hunting contest. That might have been the thing that made Rox realize, okay, maybe that's not a good thing to try to be associated with. Maybe that's not so good. So yeah, Harald is now trying to atone for the sins of, the giants of the past, the other thousands of years or whatever, um, of the history of the giants against the world government. And he is just attacking pirate ship after pirate ship after pirate ship, possibly even almost attacking, innocent civilians in the regard of like some of the fishermen and stuff like that. And this isn't just in the paradise or the New World set of the Grand Line. This is in like both halves, because like he would be able to go back and forth semi easily. We're going to see that in a minute. Narrator continues. Meanwhile, the pirates who had gone their separate ways after God Valley continued to rise in prominence, and over the next decade or so, each of them would peak to become a defining face of their generation. So we see Kaido, Whitebeard, and Big Mom, who, of course, at this point in time, Kaido, of course, was kind of wandering around at this point in time after God Valley, getting used to his dragon powers, eventually ended up getting captured and taken to Punk Hazard, where he was experimented on, where they got some of his lineage factor. And then he decided, okay, I'm bored with this, escapes, takes King with him, takes Albert with him, and they essentially form the basis of what would become the Beast Pirates later on. And then, of course, much, much later on, Queen would become a part of that, and then, everybody else. But, Kaido's kind of still off on his own. This point in time, Whitebeard, he probably left God Valley with, Polo Graham, with Marco's dad, and is now probably off sailing on his own, possibly has Marco on his crew at this point in time, depending on stuff for, 33 years ago, possibly is building up his sons and his children and stuff like that he, takes in as his crew, and builds that up, is building up that reputation of Pops. And then we also see Big Mom here, who, of course, just looks psychotic. She does look psychotic here, I will give her that. And she would just be going through and having more children, building up Totland, Whole Cake Island, Totland, all of that stuff with like Streisand and all of that. Possibly, the only marriages that we know of canonically 100% are, of course, Chiffon and Beji, Lola and Gotti, which Big Mom would not approve of, Aladdin and Praline, and then, of course, the one that was attempted between Sanji and Pudding. There's also another one in the One Piece Odyssey. I guess there's a guy that you meet who claims to be one of Big Mom's sons-in-laws, but we never find out which daughter he would supposedly be married to. And given that Big Mom makes this big deal out of like these dynastic marriages between her children and other crews, although we've only seen it with the daughters, we haven't seen any of her sons be married yet, but between her children and the other crews, it would make sense that some of her older children would be married, although that's never fully mentioned in the story, fully yet. I thought Pudding alluded to it at some point in time, but I'm not sure. We just haven't gotten confirmation about any of it yet, but like she would be building that up at the moment. And like these are the ones who would become the future Yonko alongside essentially, probably Roger for a while, because Roger is of course out and about during all this. We're going to see him in a minute. We know that eventually Shiki, that Shiki is out and about during all of this stuff. Eventually he's one of the Yonko as well, before Shanks takes up that post about 6 years ago. So we kind of see some of that here. They're all building up their empires, or they're building up their territories, or stuff like that. Building their power, building their crews, stuff like that. Most of these pirates simply clashed over territory. So we see Ochoko, who the last time we saw him he was referenced that he was staying on Hachinosu in order to like defend Hachinosu when the rest of the crew went to go try to save Shaki from God Valley. He of course was the one who betrayed them and resulted in Shaki being captured and all of that stuff. So he a prick, which we already knew about, and he at this point in time is just like building up his power, solidifying his power over God Valley, or not over God Valley, over Hachinosu, which he will have for the next nearly 30 years, like 37, or 40 years, nearly 37 years or so until, everything happens with the Rocky Port incident and Blackbeard and Law and Kobe and all of that stuff. We also see Shiki here. We know that a lot of the Yonkos, a lot of the others ended up clashing over territory. Makes sense. However, one crew broke through all the others and achieved a feat long believed impossible. They circumnavigated the entire world. And we see the Oro Jackson here. And it is... They were hailed as the crew of the King of the Pirates, Gold Roger. The public execution of the captured pirate king was meant to serve as a spectacle, a display of the world government's power. However, are you itchy already? You just went to the groomer on Tuesday. I itch. I can't help it, Mama. I itch. So... we see this great picture of the Roger Pirates here. We see Shanks and Buggy and Roger and Rayleigh and Scopper and Crocus and Mr. Monoma and a couple of others. We don't see Odin here. You don't even know who Odin is. I don't know, but he sounds cool. Who's Odin, Mom? So we see several of the Roger Pirates here, and they're just, happy and jolly and, all, celebrating and everything. Probably whatever victory they're showing here. And, so we're seeing that here. And of course, yes, Roger's execution was meant to act as this, warning, to the other pirates of the world. It was just like, if you continue down these paths, or future pirates, if you continue down these paths, it will lead to your death. It will lead to your execution at our hand. And so, yes, it was meant to be this spectacle, this warning to, the rest of the pirates and everything. Of course, Roger, as I said in the video discussing the types of death, he turns it into this huge statement, this spectacle, he has it be a spectacle, yes, and he flips it and makes it even worse for the world government, makes it even worse for the Marines and for those who are executing him, because now he has motivated not just those who are currently pirates, like the rest of the other ones who were the Yonko at the time and all that stuff. He has motivated it. He has used it to compel and to propel so many others to go out and be, form what is the Great Pirate Era. And eventually, of course, what ends up kind of culminating in, the worst generation and everything with the supernovas and all that stuff. That's, Luffy's generation or everything, 24-ish years after Roger's execution. And, and we see that's the whole way that the story starts is, wealth, fame, power, all of that stuff. You can find my treasure if you can have it. I left everything I own in one place. Now you just have to find it. And, that's where they're headed. And it has just motivated all these pirates, which just makes it worse for the world government, which is just funny. So it's, however, and we see Roger's execution. The world was plunged into even greater turmoil as countless souls set out in pursuit of the vast treasure Roger left behind, the One Piece. So again, it's just this whole thing of just oh, yeah, I know, you're gonna execute me. Yeah, no, I'm well aware of that. Yeah, I know, I figured that when when I was captured, that was, I could have just stayed with my wife and maybe taken her somewhere else. I could have died. All that stuff. Smarter move here, Roger, would have been to get your wife to somewhere safe, so that way she doesn't have to worry about hiding the fact that she's pregnant. But reasons. You still have other crew members. Yes, your crew's disbanded. Go find Rayleigh and Scopper. Be like, hey, I found a woman. I went, Rouge, you remember Rouge? Yeah, we remember. Okay, I went and had a kid with her. She's pregnant. I'm going to go hand myself into the Marines. Can you guys go and get her and take her somewhere safe? I'm going to tell Garp about her, because reasons. because I trust Garp. And he's not going to let that child, my child, be killed for who I am. Wrong. Well, Garp technically doesn't 100% let that happen, but he almost does. But all of that stuff. So we get all of that. So yes, it's like Roger turns his death into a spectacle and flips it on the world government and creates the Great Pirate Era. No one had anticipated the advent of the Great Pirate Era. Navy headquarters found itself caught off guard. As a result, more than 10 giants were drafted into the Marines from all over the world in an effort to consolidate strength. So we're seeing a bunch of these other giants come here. And some of these might be other giants that we've seen in the past, maybe just as like other parts of the giant squad that we've seen. And it says not just from it's not from Elbaf specifically, or at least not in this translation. It's not Elbaf specifically, it's from all over the world. And of course, we know that that's something that happens because, like, even prior to that, we know that Saul has been in the Marines for a while at this point in time. That Saul's been there for a while at this point in time. And we know that other giants, like John Giant, has been there for a while as well. All of that stuff. We know that they've been in the Marines for quite a while. It just isn't as much of a thing, and now there's much more giants that are being drafted and just like probably almost instantly promoted very high up in the rankings because they're so strong. So we see a bunch of these giants being, initiated into the Marines. And now we see Marie-Joie. And it's like, during this stretch of time, Harold waited on the Navy, hand and foot. And we see Marie-Joie, and we see, Castle Pangea, and we see, like, the town, and it's just like, did you see how huge he was? He's an ancient giant. I want to make him my slave. So this is a bunch of the celestial dragons that are just, like, watching as, like, Harold is visiting Marie-Joie, visiting Pangea Castle to go and speak with the Gorosei. And because, like, Emu was just literally offered this golden calf. Emu was offered the golden freaking goose. By the goose itself, when Harold showed up at the end of the last chapter and went, I will serve the world government to atone for whatever. And, Emu's just like, well, far be it for me to deny the man what he wants. I mean, I'm not that cruel. When it aligns with what I want anyway. So that's what happened. Emu essentially jumped at that offer. And And, Harold is making visits to the world government. We're going to find out something else in a moment. And it is like, and that very year, he was finally granted formal permission to visit the Holy Land. So he's been to the Holy Land before. He was here, 30-something, 40-something years ago or whatever, that we saw much earlier on in the flashback. When he interacted with Rox for the first time, and when he had infiltrated somehow infiltrated the Reverie, and such. So now we see him in the Room of Authority with the Gorosei. I mean, we see that the Room of Authority is just so huge. So, and Harold is in here, and he's like sitting on the ground, cross-legged on the ground like a child. To be fair, I sit that way too, so let's not go with that comparison. But he's like sitting and talking to the Gorosei, and they're discussing a type of contract, and he's like, a shallow sea contract? And Warcury is like, that is correct. Consider yourself the right hand of the God's Knights. God's Steel. And we see Harold, and he has the tattoo that's like the 2 lines with what looks like little hearts on the end of them, and then the circle. That is the same tattoo that we saw on Shanks that was on his left arm. And it's also on Harold's left arm. I wonder if it's always on the left arm. And I think we saw, I don't remember, I thought we saw Summers have the symbol on him as well. So this is the symbol of the Abyss, or at least part of the symbol of the Abyss. And Harold is like, it is a great honor to have this. And I'm like, not so much. And the Gorosei are continuing, and they're explaining this to him. Of course, these are the original Gorosei that we are familiar with. And it's just like, there are 3 levels of contract. The shallow sea contract is a more minor pact. The deep sea and deep sea contracts are reserved for those who are to be bound fully to the true God. Only 13 individuals in the entire world receive that privilege. So there's the shallow sea contract, which is, I'm assuming, what allows you to at least enter the abyss and travel around, I would assume. At least have that type of basic setup there. Probably doesn't have anything to do with, you probably can't regenerate. Probably can't have the eternal youth. That's probably the other two contracts. And we were under the impression anyway that this was the case, where there were different levels of the type of contract that you could have with Emu, essentially. And this deep sea one, or the shallow sea one, is, and of course, these might get slightly changed based on what the official translation is. But at the moment, shallow sea, deep sea, and deep sea. So the shallow sea one is probably just like being able to use the abyss to like transport yourself around to other areas where the abyss is available. Which is probably why Harald had the symbol in the throne room to begin with. Then we have the deep sea contract. Deep sea probably includes the regenerative abilities on top of being able to use the abyss to transport yourself around. Means that, you're going to be able to heal if you get hurt, type of a thing. Because this is probably what the majority of the God's Knights have, barring Gunko and the Gorosei. So we have, because like Garling, we saw Garling and Summers and Maffey and a bunch of the other ones at God Valley, and then now even at Elbath with Summers and such, that they are able to regenerate, but they are not eternally youthful, or they're not stuck at the age that they were when they made the contract. Then you have the deep sea contract, or like the ocean's depth, I think is one of the other translations I saw, which I like that concept too, because it's like shallow, deep, and then like the ocean floor, or like the bottom of the sea contract. A bunch of these. Poor unfortunate souls. Just bring Ursula into this. Sure, go ahead. I'd be okay with that. I love Ursula. But so the deep sea contract is very much probably the one that has, you can teleport and transport and everything like that all over wherever. You can regenerate. You also will no longer age, which is probably what the Gorosei have, along with what Gunko has. And they seem to be the only ones who have this type of a contract. Clearly this is with Emu. And they say here, well, you'll be able to make that contract with the true God. Fully to the true God. And Harald's like, what do you mean by God? Fair question. And Ethan Barron is just like, you will only come to know the greatest depths of this world on the day you become a full Knight of God. So the God's Knights, we are aware that the God's Knights definitely know about Emu. They would have had to be able to make their contracts to the point where they are. The Gorosei must just be able to offer the deep sea or the shallow sea one and be like, we have the ability to offer this to you. Like, they can offer that, and that's like the only one that they can offer. And then anyone that are the full-on God's Knights, because Harald's not a God's Knight yet. He is a Blade of God, or, some variation of that. He's like the right hand of the God's Knight. He's not a God's Knight yet. And we saw that a similar title, I think, given to Gunko during God Valley, where she is referred to as like the Blade of God or God's Steel, but it was meant as like a derogatory term. It's like, yeah, she's like a squire to the God's Knight. She's like a God's Knight in training. She's not fully a God's Knight yet, type of a thing. So we have that. So they're talking about, on the day that you fully become a God's Knight, become a Knight of God. And Harald is like, could Elbath become a member nation then? And it's again, this desperation. And Saturn is like, naturally, Harold. At that point, the entire world would be clamoring to welcome you. And Harald's just like, oh, I'm grateful for this opportunity to prove myself. And we see the scars on his head from where he ripped off his own horns. And now we're going to see Garling, who's now more middle-aged at this point in time. Somewhere in his, 40s, early 50s, late 40s, early 50s range. And he's starting to grow out his beard, his pointed beard, and his, marks on, his little side tufts. So he's not fully where he was, that we see him in present day, but, we see that. And Harald is walking around through Marigeois. And we get to see some other areas of Marigeois. We haven't kind of seen this area before. This area looks a little bit more like the Greek-style temples and stuff like that is what this part looks like. And we see they look just like regular celestial dragons around him. And it's just like the Knight's Temple, Shangara, domain of the gods. So this is like this temple that is within in Marigeois, where the gods' knights go, where they train, where they make pacts, or whatever the case is. And Shangara, not Shandora, but maybe a reference to that. It's not Nirvana or anything like that, or like Shangri-La. I guess maybe that could be a reference that they're trying to go for, is like Shangri-La, because that wouldn't be too far off from the spelling. So we'll see how that ends up being, officially spelled. And we see Garling here, and it's just like Captain of the Gods Knights, Figurland family, Saint Garling. And it's just like, what is the Great One planning? It's like what he's like asking, like, what is Emu planning to do with this? And Summers is like, you're gonna obey us even though you're King of Elbath. He's like talking to Harald about this. And we see Shamrock here. I guess it could be Shanks, but pretty sure it's Shamrock here at the moment. Not sure if it's Shanks or Shamrock, but it's one of the two. And Harald is like, of course, just say the word. And Garling is just like, we'll keep a long distance transponder snail on hand and call if we have need of you. You'll be free to travel the surface world, but you are forbidden to speak of our dealings. Understood. So we get a long distance transponder snail, sure. And I wonder if that's going to be something that gets set up for later, that's like they took that snail and put it somewhere else. We'll see what happens with that. So Harald is like, yes, I get it. I'm not allowed to talk about any of the dealings that we're having. So now we go to the Ryugu Kingdom. 20 years ago. Fishman Island. And he's laughing and everything like that. We see him and Neptune. And of course, we're going to like the size comparison between like Harald and Neptune. And Harald is just like, I haven't laughed this hard in a long time. Neptune is just like, oh God, I needed that. And Neptune is just like, join me, pal Jaman. We both have our fair share of headaches, don't we? And, Neptune is just like, to be honest, I don't think your son is that bad deep down. Let's not forget what your youth was like. So this is the reference to Loki. Of course, Loki is kind of off on Elbath at this point in time. Loki would be 43 at this point in time. So 43 divided by 3. Oh, frick, where's my calculator? Loki's around like 14 and a half at this point in time, roughly, for like human years, and Haradine would be a bit older. So he's like 14 and a half going on 15 at this point in time. So roughly about the same age that Harald was when he became king. And Harald is just like, what? Yeah, well, when you put it like that, it's like, yeah, I wasn't the sharpest axe in the shed. When I was that age. To be fair, you're not the sharpest axe in the shed now, Harald, but we'll leave that alone for the moment. And Neptune is just like, I'm just being brutally honest. Anyway, did I tell you a fortune teller predicted I'd have a daughter in 4 years? And it's just like, when the time is right, why don't you Why don't we betroth Loki to my future daughter? Oh, God. Um, I love the look on Harald's face. I'm sorry, what now? Just like, what? Why? Like, Harald has not had a good history with betrothals. He was betrothed to. Are you back? Come on. Good chap. Is Grandma boring downstairs? He's like, I don't know, but I wanted to come see Mama. And now the door closed itself. So Harald is like, okay, maybe I don't want my son betrothed to anybody. It's like the look on his face of like, okay, maybe not. Because he didn't have the best experience with Esther. He did not have the best experience with Estrid. So, and I love the fact that it's just like, well, you know, maybe. And Harald's like, now you're going too far. Cut it out. Nope, we're not doing that. And Neptune is just like, hey, don't write her off so fast. She's not going to be just any old mermaid. My daughter might be born with the power no one else could ever hope to handle. And of course, this is a reference to her being Poseidon, her being the current incarnation of Poseidon, with the power to communicate and control the Sea Kings. And he's continuing. It's Harald that says this. Well, now, that does sound like a perfect match. Let's have a toast. Here's to the future of my mischievous troublemaker and your little Mosa. Don't call her that. She won't be Shaggy. So this is essentially possibly confirming that, yes, Shirahoshi is Mosa, and that's why Loki keeps calling Mosa. There could also still be this other difference, like this is like throwing us off the scent. There's so many, you know, and it could just be that like Loki didn't know about that when he, you know, proposed to Lola, which Shirahoshi would have only been like 5. No, Shirahoshi is 16. Lola would have left. It's like 8 years ago or something like that she left, because like Pudding was only like 7 or 8 when Lola left. So maybe they didn't know about the deal at that point in time. And we see Otohime, and she has Fukaboshi is already born, and now she has Ryoboshi, who's the one that like it's Fukaboshi, Ryoboshi, and Momboshi, and I think this is Momboshi that she's holding. Or is it Ryoboshi? It's one of the two, but we see her with 2 of her sons. And yeah, don't call my daughter Shaggy. Don't call my daughter Harry. So now we cut back to Elbath, and it's like that same year, Owl Library, Elbath. Don't mention it. You're welcome to live freely here, Saul. So 20 years ago would have been like after Saul had made his way to, everything happened at Ohara. That would be 22 years ago. He ended up somehow making his way, he survived and everything, made his way to Elbath. Somehow the West Blue does border the New World, so there's a possibility there. Made his way to Elbath, asked for help. We know that Haradine and his group, Gerd and Goldberg and such, they came and they helped salvage all of the books out of the lake and fix them and everything as best as possible. And then Haradine is essentially Harald is just like, oh yeah, no, that's fine, you can come and live here, that's not a problem, you can stay here, you can put all the books in the library, not a problem, Saul, we got no problem with that. And we see, it's just like, actually, there's one thing I'd like to ask. And Saul's like, what is it? And we see Ripley here, and I think she has, it looks like she has her hand up, so it looks like maybe she has, like, Scopper in her hand, because 20 years ago would have been, 20 years ago would have been, oh, frick. when Colin was born and would have been 20 years ago. But I don't know. But it looks like it's just her sword on her back that she's like, and we just looks like she's holding something, so I'm not sure. But that is definitely Ripley. And it's like, what is it? And Harl's just like, if we get other learned folks on Elbath to help, would you be willing to open a school here? And he's like, they're in the Warrior Spring. Like, we see the owl library on one side, and then the tree where the Walrus School is going to end up being built. And Saul's like, a school? That's a nice idea. That'll be a good idea. Hi, Chip. What are you looking for? Come on. I know you're a chipper chip. Are you my chip? You're a good chip. You're the best little chipper boo in the world. You swear. Good chip. So now we cut to 15 years ago, and of course the major event that happened 15 years ago in the One Piece world is that Fisher Tiger managed to escape Marie-Joie somehow. And we're going to find out what that somehow was now. So 15 years ago, a major incident occurred at the Holy Land of Marie-Joie. And it's like, just like panic is happening. My slaves are running away. The cells are broken. Hurry. Or do you want to be their pet forever? So it's, he's shown up here. And we see, Fisher Tiger has managed to like break some of his chains and he is escaping. And he's just like running around, and we see him come by this figure. And this figure, Shanks Shamrock looking figure from what we see, and he's like, dang it, is that a God's Knight? And we see the figure just like slash past him and slice the collar that is on Fisher Tiger's neck. The explosive collar that's on his neck. He slices that. And it says, listen, the armory will be left unlocked for you. I'll tell you the location. And Fisher Tiger is just like, what the hell? Like, oh my God, what the heck are you talking about? And, because what we were told in regards to Fisher Tiger's timeline is that he is captured and made a slave at some point in time. He grows up in the Fishman District with Jinbei and Arlong and stuff like that as like their big brother figure. He then leaves, goes, explores, ends up getting captured, being made a slave, forced to be a slave in Marie-Joie for we're not sure how long, but eventually he managed to escape. Apparently, he, got his chains free and everything like that, eventually figured out, how to do that. Shanks helps him now, and what we were aware of is that he then leaves Marie-Joie, ends up eventually making his way back to Fishman Island. He has figured out the Mark of the Sun at that point in time. Probably Nika inspired that he heard about as a slave. Covers up the Puff of the Dragon brand that's on him with the new one. And then he is reunited with, Arlong and Jinbei and all of that stuff. And then he goes to Neptune and Otohime and it's just like, explains to them what happened to him and what he's going to go do, which is climb the Red Line and attack Marie-Joie and free as many slaves as he can, regardless of what species they are, what race they are. I love you. Do you want out of the room? So he, the timeline we then have is then he climbs back up the Red Line, scales the Red Line, and then rampages through Marie-Joie, freeing as many slaves as he can. And, including the Boa sisters and Koala and a bunch of other ones that we're going to see in a second. And he does that. So, did he do all of that on the same night? Because I was under the impression that he left, recuperated, and came back and did it. That was what I was under the impression of. So we see just like a ton of chaos happening out here. Shanks freed him, and we see Hurry Big Sis, and we see, Hancock chained Sandersonia, And it's just like, there's someone out there, someone fighting to free us from this hell. And we see, Hancock just crying, and Saint Ursonia is crying. We don't see Marigold, but she would be here too. And then we have a, hurry, Koala, you have to run. And we see like little Koala there. And this is just kind of like probably something that's going to either get clarified in the official or something that someone will ask about in an SBS and then be like, you said this and then that happened and then you showed this. So did this all happen at the same time or what? And then like Oda will clarify or whatever. And, so we see that. And we don't see the person who it is that's talking to Koala. I would find it interesting if it was like Shanks that freed her or something, or someone else who like allows her to escape or something. But like, they run around, they're all getting attacked and everything. And it's just like, this attack on the Holy Land was carried out by Fisher Tiger. In the wake of this incident, he would go on to become captain of the Sun Pirates. So we see, Fisher Tiger with the Sun Pirate flag. And then we also see the slaves that are all escaping. We see the Boa sisters front and center. Koala would be here as well. I would have liked it if it was like Hancock or one of her sisters telling Koala that she had to escape. That would be a good way of doing it, to like connect those three together with Koala. That would be fun. But like they're escaping as Marie Joie is like burning behind them, as just like so many other slaves are escaping as well. And we cut back to Marie Joie, and it's like in the rebuilding process. And it's like, and Harold is like, sounds like it was pretty rough. And Summers is like, they say someone with the government must have left the armory open for them. Now it's up to us to find the culprit. And it's just like, I can't wait to execute them. So they're, Summers is effed in the head, as we already know. And now we have Garling here. And he's like, there's someone I want to introduce you to, Harold. His name is Shanks. Huh? And Shanks is now here. Assumedly, Shanks has not been here yet in regards to being in Marie Joie. So, not sure exactly how. I went through and I double checked through Shanks's timeline for like exact time frame that we know of. So we know that at some point, that 24 years ago after Roger's execution, Buggy and Shanks split. They split and they go their separate ways, much to Shanks's sadness. And then later, probably Buggy's regret. Then 22 years ago, we have Shanks meets Yasopp. So Shanks met Yasopp. He went to, the Gecko Island Syrup Village, met Yasopp there. Then 19 years ago, Shanks and his crew find Uta in a treasure chest. Uta is canon. Whether or not we know that the full-on events of like Film Red are not canon, but Shanks finding Uta is canon. Raising her as his daughter is canon. We don't 100% know everything else yet for like where Uta currently is in the story. This might lead to some hints about that. But Uta at one point in time was canon. Whether or not she actually knew Luffy, that we're not sure about yet. But Uta is canon. And that would have been 19 years ago. And Shanks had his crew at that point in time because he finds her with the rest of the crew. Then we know at some point in time, between 18 and 14 years ago, Shanks somehow gets the scar from Teach. He gets a scar while he's fighting Teach. And that's how he knows that like Teach is very dangerous. Type of a thing. And he tells that to Whitebeard. And then we know at some point in time, lived at Marie Joie. Was a member of the Celestial Dragons, and lived with Garling and Shamrock, and got to know them and all that stuff. We are seeing that here. We are seeing that at this point in time, 15, 14 or so years ago, Shanks is here in Marie Joie, living with Garling and Shamrock, and is taking up a type of post to a degree as a Celestial Dragon and as like a Blade of God, as a God's Knight type of thing. Him and Shamrock are not full-on God's Knights yet, but as, a Blade of God. And Garling is continuing. He's Shamrock's younger brother. They were separated a long time ago due to circumstances. He suffered many hardships in the surface world. If he were to form a deep-sea contract, I believe he'd make a great asset on par with Shamrock. For the time being, however, he's been given the rank of God Steel, just like you. And Harold is just like, I know I said the same when I first met Shamrock too, but I can't shake the feeling that I've met you before. What? What do you mean you've met them before? Okay, so Shanks is essentially a god still. He's a god's knight in training. Just like Harold is at this point in time. We saw that when, at the beginning of this flashback when we saw Shanks on Elbath with the mark of the abyss on him, on his left arm. That's going to get, ripped off later by the Sea King. So, I know I said the same thing when I first met you, Shamrock. When I first met Shamrock too. But I can't shake the feeling that I've met you before. What do you mean that you've met them before? I don't get that. What do you mean by that? And we see Shanks, and he's got a bandage on his face, and he's just like, I don't know what you're talking about. You're just some giant commoner from the surface. Don't act so familiar with me. I was blessed from birth with Figureland blood in my veins. Have no doubt that I'm going to become a knight of God before you. Harold, I guess I mistook you for someone else. Now, I don't remember if we get confirmation that Harold and Roger ever really interacted. We know that Harold and Rox very much interacted. Same thing with Harold and Garp. But I don't remember if we got confirmation that Harold and Roger ever really interacted. So I'm not sure where they're headed with that. So, maybe I don't know. But Shanks here is very much, he is putting on airs. He is acting. He is putting on a Oscar and every single award winning performance here of he's acting like he hated being with the Roger Pirates. He's like, I despised being with them, and the second that I found out where I was from, I left. I came here, I found out who my real family was, Garling and Shamrock and all that. I found who my real family was, and now I will train to become a god's knight, and I will surpass anybody who will defy me, type of a thing. Anybody who stands in my way, type of a thing. And, we've seen Shanks be threatening. Way back in the beginning when Shanks is, threatening Higema, not in the bar, but later after when Higema comes back and is threatening the town, Shanks is very, oh no, you're not doing that. And then, and then he kind of he threatens Higema and all that stuff, and Higema's men. And then of course we see Shanks, scare off the Lord of the Coast after it rips off his arm, and all that. So there's this whole question here of and we don't know the full setup of Shanks' timeline. I went over the bits that we have there of this time, and then there's a chunk of time where we don't know that much of what happened. And depending on how much canonical information we get about Uta and canonical information for how that lines up with Shanks, whether or not, and how that lines up with when he was at Fuchsia Village and all of that stuff with Luffy, he could have very well still technically been a Blade of God when he was there. And it may have been something where he's like, I'm going to go undercover as a pirate. And that's the ploy that he uses. And maybe he has frickin' stuck with that ploy of being undercover, where he is actually out doing what he wants to do of sailing around, finding his crew, having fun, all of that stuff, going on these adventures. But then he periodically has to go back to Marijois, which is why he was able to get all the way up to Marijois into the Room of Authority at Reverie and have a conversation with the Gorosei and be able to do that. So there's that concept there of just what have you been up to, Shanks? And it's he's been undercover, deep cover to a degree, both sides, where he's playing both sides, very much to the way that in In Harry Potter, you have Shanks. Snape. Snape, who plays both sides, where he's, he's an agent for Voldemort, pretending to spy on the Order, does have to give them information, but in reality, he's a double agent where he is actually, because of the deal that he made with Dumbledore to protect Lily, only Lily, who also has red hair. I wonder if there's a connection there. Where, there's that concept where he is, truly loyal to Dumbledore because of Lily, and he's, spying on the Death Eaters and giving the information to Dumbledore to then give to the rest of the Order, even though nobody else knows about it. Where he plays where he plays Voldemort and the Death Eaters, not quite like a fiddle, because he still gets in the end, but still gets pretty, plays him pretty dang well throughout that part of the story. But, Shanks here, it's like, he gets to be his real self around his crew, around Ben Beckman and Lucky Roo and Yasopp and the others. He gets to be himself around them, and with Uta, and then, later on at Fuchsia with, Luffy and Makino and the others there, and even Whoopslap, he gets to be his real self around them. When he goes here, when he has to go and be the Blade of God that he's pretending to be, type of a thing, he has to be this stuck-up prick version of himself who is trying to embody these ideals of what a celestial dragon is, of what a Shanks as a celestial dragon would be, this arrogance, all of this stuff. And, that's a lot. That's a lot. And given the fact that he's playing it on, we see him here with Garland, or with Shamrock here, and they're in similar uniforms, but they're not identical. And Shamrock has the longer hair to distinguish them, besides Shanks having the bandage around his face, which is probably from the scar from Blackbeard. So Shanks is come on, Shamrock, I wish to deepen my knowledge of the Holy Land, and I shall apprehend that traitor to claim the credit I deserve. Are there any leads? And Shamrock is I can wait till your wounds are fully healed, Shanks. So, okay. As we saw, it's the shallow sea contract allows you to teleport around and stuff like that with the Abyss. Does not mean that you get healing powers yet. You don't get regenerative ability, so Shanks is having to heal naturally. And I like how Shamrock is we can wait till your wounds are healed. It's fine. It's we can wait. It's not a problem. And Shanks is just you cannot fathom the anguish of having the last 24 years of your life wasted. So, 24 years. This is supposed to be Shanks, who is no, screw this. I'm assuming it's supposed to be Shanks has finally decided, okay, I know, he's gone to Ben Beckman and the others, and okay. Because Shanks is 39, so this would, 24 years. And he's went to his crew and he's just okay, here's what I have to do. I know who my father is, my biological father. Roger was my father, but my biological father. I know who he is and I know where he is. He's a celestial dragon. I'm a celestial dragon too. I have to go to Marijois. Given other information that he probably learned from Roger and learned throughout his travels and stuff like that, even some information from Rayleigh and Scopper and stuff like that about Laughtail to a degree, with Shanks kind of being hailed as the prophecy child, the child of destiny type of thing. He's I'm going to go in undercover. I have this information. I'm going to go in undercover, learn as much as I can about the Holy Land, about Marijois, about the God's Knights, the Gorosei, Celestial Dragons, all of it. Any of that information that is not public knowledge, I'm going to do my best to learn it. And I will do it under the guise of, I have been denied this life for the past 24 years, and I am going to use it to the best of my ability now. And he's just it has been wasted. No wonder the rest of the world seemed so alien to me. And we have Godsteel devotee, Figureland family, Saint Shanks. Knight of God, Figureland family, Saint Garling, or Saint Shamrock. And Shanks is like, I hated everything down there. And he's just like so angry about it. And it's this reverse. It's like him having to act like he despised everything that was down there because it felt like it was below him, because he knew innately that it was below him, that it was below where he should be, that his place should have been on top of Marijois, on top of the world, with Figureland, with the Figureland family, with Garling, with Shamrock, being raised there with the best of everything. And now he's pretending like I despised it and I hated it and I knew that I didn't belong there. I knew I belonged somewhere else, somewhere better. It's like where he's going with that, where he actually feels the opposite, where he despises everything that's up in Marijois and he loves being down on the blue sea and everything. And like Harald is walking away, and like there's like figures behind him that have hearts. So I don't know if that's supposed to be like girls fawning over Shanks and Shamrock, who, fair, girls, fair. I'm not going to deny you that. Fair. Or what? And like Harald is just like, I don't know if Harald buys it. So it has that same year, the fishing village on Elbath. It's no good. My medical knowledge is too limited. Let's call Harald and see if he can get us in touch with the more skilled doctor. Don't. He's got a lot on his plate right now. What's the point of fostering a network with the world government if you don't use it? And we cut to inside of where Ida lives. And she is very sick. It's stating that she is poisoned. I'm assuming the one who's stating, like, my medical knowledge is so limited might be Ripley. I'm not sure. Or it could be this guy next to her. This guy here, I was looking him up. He is a member of the Giant Warrior Pirates. We saw him on Egghead. And we have Ida here, and she's, like, looking very, shaky, pale type of thing. Well, she's in black and white, but probably pale. It's like, I can recover on my own. And we have the other giant and, like, we see Mato here, like, she's, like, so sad and everything like that because she really kind of idolizes Ida. And we have Mato there. And then we have the other Viking with, like, the big bushy beard. He's just like, you keep saying that, but you're getting weaker by the day. You have to get better. Harald will be heartbroken if you don't, And I very much agree with, like, what they're saying here. It's just like, if you have this network, why the F are you not using it? You have access to try to get a doctor here who might be able to help figure out what is making her sick. Work with that. And Ida is just like, Mato, keep the tavern open. And Mato's like, no way. No way. How can I when you're this sick, Ida? So she's just, like, so sad about that. I love that. And the other giant, the bushy beard giant, is just like, whenever Harald's home, he always goes straight to the elders and begs them to allow you to legally marry. So Harald is still on about that. I would be at this point in time, I would like to hope that if for some reason I was in Ida's position at this point in time, I would just go to the frickin' elders and be like, no, I am going to marry Harald. I don't care about any of that stuff. I am going to marry the man that I am in love with and who is in love with me and who has done so much for me. I would also feel like I would have been strung along for quite a while at this point in time. But Harald does truly love her. Does truly love Ida. And in all honesty, he should have been like, no, I am going to marry her. Estrid is dead. Her son is the first in line. Fine. First in line for the throne. I'm going to go marry Ida now because I am in love with her. I will legitimize Hyrule, whatever. He will be behind in the succession order with Loki. Behind Loki. All of that. So Ida is coughing. She's like, that fool. He knows I'm happy with my tavern. I enjoy befriending sailors from all over the world. She's like coughing. It may not be much, but I feel like I'm helping Harald by doing that. And we hear just someone shouting outside, hey, foreign hag! And Mato just gets so angry. What? And she, like, runs outside, and she's like, we see Loki here, and he's, like, knocked out, like, whatever random Elbath cow. And she's like, Loki! And he's showing up, and he's like, hey, cook up this meat for the old hag, will ya? And he's just like, the tavern's my main hangout spot. I want her to reopen it. So I love what we get here with Loki, because this is very much Loki being Loki, but very much Loki being like, I can't be the softy that I want to be for Ida, for the woman who is my mother, as we're going to see at the end of the chapter, for the way that he does view her. I can't just show up and be like, hey, I brought something. Can we cook it up and give it to her to help her get her strength back? I can't be the softy that I want to be. I have to be this little prick that everybody thinks I am. Because if I show any type of weakness, then it may lead to something bad. Because that's been what's unfortunately ingrained in him. So he is just like, ah. So he's like, here, I brought this giant. Essentially, what Loki is trying to say is, here, I brought this cow. Let's cook it and we can give it to Ida so that way she can, regain her strength and feel better. So that way my mom will be okay again, type of a thing. But that's not how he can say it because he's emotionally constipated, to quote Disney. And we have like the bushy giant coming, just like, good grief, that troublemaker has grown out of hand. I'm glad you've been able to keep him in line. Even with Hyrule and his friends away looking for a doctor, your boys really love you. So I love that they have this where it is confirming, where it's just like, the ones who know Ida and are around her and know Hyrule and know Loki, that he really, let's see the way that he actually is around her, sees that he actually cares about her. And like, yeah, we have Hyrule out here and he's sailing, and we see Rode and Goldberg and Gerd, and we see Stanson, we see all of them. They're on their ship, they're off sailing. Hyrule's like, I gotta find a doctor to help my mom, type of a thing. And like, he's like, I will find a doctor to help her and all that stuff. So he's like sailing off to go to do that. And we see Ida and she's like coughing again. And she's like, everyone's blowing this out of proportion. I'll be fine. But it does make me smile. So, Loki has gone to the Elbath alcohol village, hometown of Loki's birth mother, of Estrid. What'd you just say? So we have Loki shouting. And we have like one of the other villagers there who is just like, we were talking about how utterly unbearable it'd be to let that foreign, bitch, worm her way into the royal family. You're with us, right, Loki? We're Estrid's relatives. She was Harald's true wife. We can't let anyone have a claim on your inheritance. And it's like this old freaky looking guy with like a little bottle of whatever poison or whatever. That's why I slipped her a dose of poison. This stuff is fatal. Her days are numbered. Bad move. Very bad move on that one, dude. Very bad move. And Estrid or Ida is getting worse and worse. And like, the doctor is just like, Mato, we can't hold off ringing Harald anymore. And she's like, on it. So she's running to go try to call Harald. And Ida is just like, we may not be related by blood, but I see him the same way I do Hyrule. Loki is still my cute little son. And Loki is like at this village. He has swung his hammer at the prick that poisoned Ida. Guy's face and arm are very broken. And he's like, Loki, hey, what do you mean? What are you doing? And he's just like, Ida isn't really gonna die, right? Is like as angry as Loki is. And he's just like, the village is just now on fire. And he has the guy by the neck. And he's just like, I still remember my birth mother. She hated me. She had me thrown into the realm of the dead. You guys, who gives a shit about inheritance? My whole family is nothing but trash. Now answer. Ida won't actually die, right? And he's like pausing as he's like remembering Ida. And it's like her just smiling at him. And she's like, I bet you must be pretty lonely, right, Loki? Wouldn't it be better to stay with us? So this is going back all the way to like Estrid is dead, Loki is very young, Harold is out doing all of his, trying to build up, connections with the world and everything else like that. Originally, good. Currently, not working out well. And she's like, Loki doesn't deserve to just be alone in the castle. He doesn't deserve any of that. He deserves to try to be in some type of a loving home with some type of a loving mother, regardless as like his stepmother, his whatever you want to refer to it as. She is doing the exact opposite of how Catelyn Stark acts to Jon Snow in Game of Thrones and the way that Catelyn should have treated Jon. She is just like, yeah, you are a child who doesn't have your mother anymore. Your brother, I'm the mother of your half brother. I'm going to, I will offer you space in my home. In my home, in my family, and in my heart is what she is offering him. And Ida has held up her end of the bargain. And it's not a bargain, her end of this offer, this promise, so well. And Loki took it to heart regardless of how much he kept wanting to try to just be this brat. And he's like, she's the only mother I've ever known. Because, yeah, Estrid threw him out of the castle and into the underworld. She hated him. She despised him. She didn't want anything to do with him. And then he was left in the care of the steward that was Estrid's brother, who just mistreated Loki all over the place. Don't blame Loki if he's the one who shoved him into the underworld, made him fall, or whatever the case was. And Loki has this village burning around him because all of these people who are like, they're Estrid's family, and they're like, well, she was the real queen. She was she was Harold's true wife. So that means that you get everything. So that means that we'll get everything is like where they're going. And they decided to poison an innocent woman who has done nothing except try to support Harold, to be loving to Loki, and has done nothing to try to hurt the people of Elbath. But because of their prejudice, because of their greed, they decide that they want to kill her. And they want to make her suffer for it. For something that she has done nothing to harm them. And this is like when we're first introduced to Loki, when we're first told about stuff with Loki, we are told that at some point he does burn a village to the ground and like releases a ton of animals into the village. That is probably this incident here, where he is burning this village to the ground because they have attacked the one person in his life whom has shown him nothing but compassion, nothing but kindness and love. And that is Ida. That is a woman who he views as his mother. And I love that because there is one thing that has been harped on in this series so much. Yes, found family, very much important. But one of the other things that Oda has harped on in this series from the beginning is the power of a mother's love. We saw that to a degree with Bonchina, where she did her best with Usopp and where she was heartbroken when she knew she was going to have to leave him when she died. We saw that with Nami and Nojiko when it came to Belmare. We have seen that with Sanji with his mother. Probably something with Zoro in his past with his mom. We have seen that with Frankie when it came to Kokoro. We have seen that with Kureha when it comes to Chopper. We have seen that when it comes, we don't know that much about like Jinbei and Brook's parents, but there is stuff there. I have gone through this multiple times for so many different characters, for their relationships with their mother. Big Mom and Estrid being the two main ones that are just like, yeah, no, they were not good parents. They were horrible parents. But I don't know. And like, even we saw that just several chapters ago with, Shanks and Shamrock's mom begging Dragon to be like, please don't let my boys be raised by him. Please keep them safe. Please get them out of here. She uses her last breaths to plead for the lives of her sons. Not just for their lives, but for their souls and for their hearts. So that way they're not raised by Garling and turned into horrible little monsters the way that he is. And Ida is proving that here again. It's like Big Mom and Estrid are the exceptions that prove the rule for the way that so many moms, and for Luffy, we have Dodon, for him, and Sabo and Ace and all of that stuff. And for Ace, we also have Rouge and all of that stuff. So we see that here. We see that, for like the mother's love for their children. And throughout One Piece, we also have like amazing dads that have like the love for their children here. But for here, it is very much harping on how much Ida views Loki, Hardin and Loki as her sons. And there is very much the reference here to the way that or at the very least in Marvel Comics, I'm not exactly sure how it lands in mythology for Norse mythology, but in the Marvel Comics, you have, or at the very least in the cinematic universe, you have Thor and Loki as brothers. And then Hela gets thrown in there as well when you get into the movies. And, Loki is not Freya's son. He's not even Odin's son. He's adopted. And Freya still loves him just as much as she loves Loki. And we see that throughout the course of Thor and Thor the Dark World. I gotta admit, I like Thor the Dark World. I know a lot of people don't, but I like it. And we see the way that she is with him. She still loves him regardless of the fact that he is not her biological son, that he is not even Odin's biological son. And we see that there, and I love that. And there's two great things from one of the artists that I see on Tumblr a lot. Elapri, I think it's the name. And it's just these two adorable things of like Ida and Loki. And then the one that is Loki holding all of his plushies that are like his important people. That are, Harald is there, and Hyrene is there, and Jarl is there, and Ida is there. And it's just adorable for the way that lands, for like the way that he views what's in his heart, the ones that he loves. And like Rox is there, and Jarl is there. And I love that person, that Elapri or whatever, sorry if I mispronounced your name, that they love them. I'll put the links into the description. But I love that they show that they drew that, because they're so adorable. And it is very much the way that Loki views them. And we're getting the aftermath of that at the moment, because I don't know how much, like, this part here would be what Loki would be able to tell Harding about. And like Luffy would understand that, because he knows, he views Dodon as his mom, and he would be heartbroken if Dodon died, and he knows that so much of his crew have been through that as well, and Loki has been through that. We haven't gotten confirmation if Ida is even still alive in the present day. This might be confirming that yes, she does die, and I don't want that to be the case, but that's probably going to be the case. A lot of people wanted her to be the one on the other end of the Den Mushi, and she still very well may be, but we'll see how that goes. But that's what I have here. I know it's a long chapter review. I'm sorry. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. There is supposed to be a chapter next week, I believe. Today is also my last day of work at my current job, and then I get to start the job hunt again. So that's what I have. I thank you very much, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.